Your town keeps one business it never talks about. It sits on the nicest corner of the oldest street. The lawn is always trimmed, and this week its owner quietly offered you the keys. The plan could not sound gentler. Answer the phone, host the goodbye, send the one bill nobody ever disputes. And the demand behind this deal is the surest arithmetic in America. Around 3.1 million Americans died last year. By the CDC's count, the total climbs as the country ages, and every person you will ever meet becomes a customer of this industry exactly once. So make these two numbers agree, if you can. The median American funeral, with a viewing and a burial, costs about $8,300 by the National Funeral Directors Association's own price study. The product most families now choose instead sells for about $2,200. Same death, same phone call, $6,000 of difference, and the difference is winning. 3 questions then, and this breakdown settles all of them. What a funeral home actually sells, because the honest answer appears on no price list. What the owner of a small town home really clears in a year. And what is waiting in the filing cabinet in the basement, because when you buy this building, you inherit every promise inside it. Will Dish Channel reads the numbers most owners would rather bury. Subscribe, and the quietest building in your town stops being a mystery. Price the way in first, because it comes with the first oddity. Almost nobody builds a funeral home from scratch. The asset was never the building. It is the name over the door, and a name in this trade only works after it has buried a town's grandparents for a generation or two. Trust is the inventory, and trust does not come with a construction loan. Man låter det bära för barons. So you buy one that already exists. The brokers who move these businesses price a single location home at roughly 3 to 5 times the owner's yearly earnings, or, checked against the other yardstick they use, somewhere between half and 1 times its annual revenue. A modest home whose owner clears $150,000 a year prices out between roughly $500,000 and $750,000, and the multi-chapel operations climb well into the millions. The trade itself is gated too. To sit across from a grieving family as the licensed director, most states want a mortuary science degree from an accredited program, a 1 to 3 year apprenticeship, and dozens of supervised embalmings, 50 of them in Connecticut, before the board exams even start. Sign anyway. And the chapel, the hearse, and the suite downstairs are yours. The sign is yours too. The reputation stays on loan until you earn it. Now the costs no listing sheet mentions. The first is the telephone, because your customers never make appointments. Death works nights, weekends, and Christmas morning. Somebody licensed has to answer. And in a small family firm that somebody is you, indefinitely. The second is the scale of the stage. A funeral home is a chapel, viewing rooms, a garage with a hearse, and an embalming suite built to clinical standards, all of it heated, insured, and taxed every day of the year, all of it used a few hours at a time. The third is a federal rulebook. Since 1984, the FTC's Funeral Rule has required you to hand an itemized price list to anyone who asks, and when a family wheels in a casket they bought from a warehouse club, you must accept it and may not charge a fee for doing so. And the heaviest cost in the building is on no list at all. It sits downstairs, filed alphabetically, and this story reaches it soon enough. So where is the money? Set death aside for a minute and buy a wedding venue instead. Nobody who books you is buying the marriage. A courthouse handles that for the cost of the paperwork. What they are buying is the event around it. The room, the flowers, the 100 witnesses, the dinner, the photographs. Now imagine that every year, a few more couples elope. Still married, still official, just no event. The marriage survives. The venue starves. That is this industry, translated back. A traditional burial is an event sale. The metal casket in the association's median package cost the family $2,500, and industry reporting has documented casket markups of 100 to 300% over wholesale. Add the embalming, the viewing, the chapel, and the procession, and the median bill reaches that $8,300, or nearly $10,000 once the burial vault goes into the ground. A direct cremation is the elopement. A pickup, some paperwork, the crematory, an urn handed across a counter. Around $2,200 nationwide, with no casket, no embalming, and no ceremony. It is also the fastest growing product in the building. So look again at what you are actually signing for. It is not a monopoly on death. Death is doing fine, and will do better every year for decades. You are buying the American funeral, the 2-day ritual with an audience. And the ritual is the one thing in this business a customer can cancel. The death is guaranteed. The funeral is optional. which is why the professionals stopped waiting for the phone and started selling funerals to the living. The trade calls it preneed. A family plans and pays years or decades ahead, and state law parks the money in a regulated trust, at least 75% of it in Colorado's version, or in an insurance policy naming your firm. Read what that file is worth to the owner. Every preneed contract is a future call your competitor can never take, sold at today's average while the customer is still healthy enough to shop around. The amateurs compete for this year's deaths. The professionals are quietly buying market share in deaths that are still decades away. The best in class turned that into an empire. Service Corporation International, the giant of this industry, operates roughly 1,900 funeral homes and cemeteries across North America, collects about $4.4 billion a year, and still holds only around a sixth of a market where the overwhelming majority of homes remain family or privately owned. The engine in one line. Calls times the size of the arrangement, times how many of tomorrow's calls already carry your name. So why do owners still bleed? Count a year at the average firm. The National Funeral Directors Association says its typical member handles about 113 calls a year, barely 2 a week, and those 2 calls feed a building that eats every day. Property taxes, heat, insurance, the idle hearse, and licensed staff paid to be reachable at 3 in the morning. Labor looks cheap on paper, a median wage just under $50,000 for morticians in the federal data. But the real bill is availability, because coverage never closes. And the year-end result is humbling. Merchandise margins that look healthy and gross, and net margins for independents that publish benchmarks put in the mid to high single digits, gross and net being very different rooms of this house. 2 calls a week against a building that bills you every day. That is the entire quiet war of this business. Time to go downstairs and open that cabinet. Inside are the preneed files, and every folder is a promise that now carries your signature. A funeral sold in 1998 at 1998 prices must still be delivered in full whenever it comes due. And if the trust's growth has not kept pace with 30 years of inflation, the difference comes out of you. Now the story every funeral director knows by heart. From the early 1990s until 2008, a St. Louis company called National Prearranged Services sold prepaid funerals across 16 states, close to 100,000 of them. And money that belonged in trusts was steered into risky investments and personal spending instead. The FBI described it as a Ponzi-like scheme. When it collapsed, the whole ran toward $500 million. 6 people, including the founder, Doug Cassidy, drew a combined 36 years in prison, and the cleanup has run so long that victims were still receiving restitution checks more than 15 years later, while funeral homes around the country were left holding promises made with money that no longer existed. Understand the mechanism, because it is the entire warning. Preneed is decades of other people's money sitting in an account beside an honor system, and the paper in that drawer is either your future revenue or your future lawsuit. Most of it was signed before you ever walked in. The money was collected at yesterday's prices. The funeral arrives at today's. Climb back upstairs and look at the whole country, because the 2 big lines on this industry's chart are doing something strange. Both are rising, and one is strangling the other. Deaths are climbing, from about 3.1 million now toward nearly 4 million a year by 2045, as the largest generation in American history ages out. %37% of American deaths ended in cremation in 2005, roughly 63% do today, and the association's own projection reaches 82% by 2045. Divide the two medians from the top of this video and the arithmetic is blunt. It takes nearly 4 direct cremations to replace the revenue of a single buried funeral. Private equity has already picked its side. Foundation Partners Group, backed by the investment firm Access Holdings, has bought more than 75 funeral businesses deliberately in high cremation states, betting on volume where the ceremony is already gone. Prices moved with the deeds. At one Tucson funeral home, health news reporters found the cost of a cremation rising from $425 to $760 after the acquisition. More customers every single year, and less money in every goodbye. America is not dying less, it is spending less on dying. So what does an owner actually take home? 2 very different arrangements. Arrangement 1 is the inheritance model, the White House with the chapel. Run the average 113 calls through today's mix of burials and cremations, and a small home grosses somewhere in the $500,000 to $700,000 range. Single-digit net leaves perhaps $30,000 to $50,000 in profit, stacked on the salary you pay yourself, which federal data puts near $77,000 for funeral home managers. Call it $100,000 to $150,000 a year, all in, for never being far from a ringing phone. A living, a respected one, and a slow one to get rich on. Arrangement 2 is the volume model, and it is the one the money is building. A storefront arrangement office instead of a chapel, no fleet, a contracted crematory, and several hundred low-price calls a year handled by a small licensed crew. Thinner ceremony, thicker spreadsheet, and it scales, which the White House never did. One sells the ceremony, the other sells the certificate, and the country is drifting toward the certificate. And who actually got rich here? In Houston, a man named Robert Waltrip ran his family's funeral home, the one his grandmother and father had built, and in 1962 he created a parent company to start buying others, Service Corporation International. It went public in 1969, reached the New York Stock Exchange in 1974, and grew into the largest death care company on the continent. The playbook was never charging less than the family firm down the street. It was buying the trusted name and leaving it on the sign. Reporters covering the industry's consolidators note that they rarely rename what they buy and often keep the former owners around, so the town seldom notices the deed has changed. Behind the signs, the vehicles, the prep work, and the purchasing quietly merge. Hundreds of families sold. Almost none of the signs came down. The name out front stays local. The deed behind it is what this industry trades. So close the ledger and keep the rule, because it travels far beyond funerals. The surest demand in the world was never the product. The ritual was the product, and rituals are optional. 3.1 million customers will arrive this year without fail, more next year, and more the year after that, and each year a few more of them will choose the elopement over the wedding. Sell them the goodbye anyway, sell it smaller, sell it sooner, or sell the building to somebody who will. That is the entire menu. Whose books should we open next? Name it below, then subscribe, so you have a seat at the next reading.